people who have been clinically dead and came back. How was the other side like? Story 1. When I was much younger, 12 years old, I passed out from a full cardiac arrest. This was at a high school football American game. I can only remember flashes of memories from a few hours before until 2 weeks after the incident. Riding in the back of our truck to the game, sitting in the stands with my mom, and how annoying the opposing team's chant was. Eagles, Skyline. Congrats, Skyline, in Salt Lake City. Your chant was able to pierce the veil of death. I remember a lot of black, which quickly enclosed like a shell into a tunnel. The tunnel itself was made of metal and looked exactly like the tunnel from Bespin, where Luke ends up. I don't think my mind could comprehend what it was seeing, so it filled in the gaps as best it could. The feeling was awesome, though. Unless you have seen it, there really are no words to describe it. I think this is because I cannot convey my emotions and feelings to you. They are very intense. I was dead with no heartbeat for a little over 4 minutes. This caused massive problems later with memory loss and other brain damage. My mother said I was literally crazy for about 2 weeks after this. I was constantly talking to the monk in the corner, that my cat was being tortured in the next room, that my mother had 3 eyes. I was a loon. On the bright side, I had a full-page article in both schools' yearbooks that year, so I got that going for me, which is nice. Story 2, I was 12 and very sick. I had a very high fever and remember going to the hospital and people visiting me and watching a lot of TV, back when MTV and VH1 played music videos. Other than that, I remember nothing. Years later, my mom apparently told me the rest of the story that my heart stopped and had to be defibrillated 2 times. No memories of it. The really weird part for me was that I don't have any memory of her telling me about the story. My wife told me about the story my mother told me, and it finally sunk in. It's strange how the brain can block things out. Story 3. I died twice in an ambulance while being transported from a motorcycle accident. The last thing I remember was my face hitting the hood of a car at 60 miles per hour, no helmet, and then waking up in the emergency room at the hospital. I say twice, in an ambulance, but it's my understanding that I was actually dead when the ambulance arrived, and then I died on the way to the hospital. The time between the accident and the hospital is nothing. Absolutely nothing. Story 4. My uncle was a heavy drug user and overdosed on many occasions. He had to be revived on only one occasion, and on this moment, he quit his drug use cold turkey. He was gone for a full 2 minutes. All brain activity shut down, along with the rest of his body. He told me that the only thing he could remember was sitting at a picnic table at this park that was behind the house where he was raised, the only good place in his memory. He was sitting there with someone that he knew he loved, but that he didn't know who it was. He said he just spoke to them, but had no idea what was said, only that the person said, "I'll see you later, remember me." Then after this, he was revived. Now that I think about it, he was a little crazy and still is, but I wouldn't think he would lie about this, and he was dead, so who knows? Story 5. It was peaceful. No lights, no pearly gates, no angels, just peace. I was in a horrible car wreck, and I had a blood clot go through my heart, and I died for a bit. When I woke up, everyone was yelling at me to breathe. I was pissed off because not only was I certain that I was indeed breathing, I had just been woken from the first quality sleep since my wreck. There's nothing but peace and comfort on the other side. Story 6. I posted this a long while back, so you may have read it before. What I remember is a vast nothingness. It's hard to describe, as we're always surrounded by something wherever we go. Suddenly, in this vast nothing was a blinding pinprick of light that got larger. Either I was moving towards it, or it was moving towards me. As it got closer, what appeared to be a single light resolved into first one, then several, then millions upon millions of stars, of all shapes, sizes, and colors, along with tons of nebulae. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. As I approached the center, it seemed like I was joining a universal consciousness, a being made up of the thoughts, emotions, and experience of everyone and everything that had ever lived. I'm sure it was all just a hallucination brought on by the trauma I had suffered the few days combined with my heart and breathing stopping. But there's a part of me that hopes that what I saw is what really happens when we die. Story 7. I was in a coma for a few days and died for 3 minutes. The coma itself was completely empty, no sense of time, no blackness, nothing. Every so often I would come to a little bit and saw brief, hazy flashes of scenes of a visitor, They lived out of state at the time, so I was confused and happy to see them, but couldn't physically talk to them. Worst feeling ever. Then from the next thing I remember was the famous light. Ooh, spooky. But not one light, two lights. They were circling around each other while getting bigger and bigger. They seemed almost as if they were trying to save me. Then I woke up in various different hospital rooms, ultimately being told, hey, you died for a bit and we are changing your catheter now. Not verbatim, weird experience that I forget even happened most of the time. Relearned to walk in a day or two. I still can feel the very distinct vibe if I think about it long enough. Almost like a happy nostalgia. Story 8, held in an indescribable blue-white light, a pure energy. And it was akin coming home after a long absence. No fear. Every sense heightened. Enveloped in unconditional love and exquisite joy. No sensation of a physical body. It's like my essence was distilled to its original perfect concept. Higher knowledge, deeper understanding. Years later, I sought to return to that light after waking to a man that had drugged my food. That time, no light, no peace, no welcoming. Instead, I was plunged into a smothering void. Sensory deprivation, accompanied by excruciating loneliness and fear. This time, my body came through the veil. My entire being cried out for light. What answered was a voice I felt, not heard. It told me choosing to end my life separated me from the light, that I was being returned to finish my life as it was meant to be, and to remember two words: fear not. It was the first step toward a more spiritual, not religious perspective. It's simply acknowledging all living things possess energy, and resonance is the path I'm walking. Story 9. My mother came back from dying as they were signing her death certificate. Complications with the anesthesia during a C-section. On many occasions, she has described the struggle she had as she laid there, able to feel everything but unable to move, as they cut her open and took me out. During this, she remembers losing the ability to breathe and panicking for a few moments before a realization that breathing wasn't really that important. She remembers looking down at her body and even told the doctors everything they were saying and doing to her as they tried to revive her. In her experience, coming back was a conscious choice. She felt like she could either leave or choose to stay and that it would be okay either way. Surrounded by love is something she says a lot. Obviously, she decided that she had some rather pressing responsibilities to resume and came back, but she has always described the whole event to me to be a very warm or loving or reassuring thing. Story 10. It's nothingness. To try to imagine this, sit and think about the edge of your vision on the right and left sides of your periphery. Now, try to think about what you see just past the edge of your vision. That's nothingness. This is just the conscious version of that. I also experienced the breakdown of my subjective reality, which is a far scarier thing to both experience and remember. Let me tell you right now, most of your life is just made up crap that you believe in order to maintain whatever story you've created. When your brain starts to break down and retreats to save itself, the first thing it does is sacrifice the crap story you've made up to make your life feel okay or happy or livable. Story 11. I wasn't on life support or a monitor, so I can't verify the clinically dead part, but I've been dead. There was a doctor with me who said I was dead. I've posted before discussing this, so it may overlap for some. It's just nothing. There is no light and no darkness, no warmth and no cold. You read about it sometimes, and people say it was an embrace or a chilling feeling. I had neither. I was unconscious for 20 minutes before I stopped breathing and was unconscious for the 20 minutes after I started breathing. The blackout was the same as the death. The only moment was when I started to come back. Everything was dull. When I started to open my eyes, it took 4 or 5 minutes to be able to focus. I couldn't comprehend anything said to me for almost 10 minutes. Anything I touched was wearing dive gloves and a wetsuit. Felt alien, like I was touching it for the first time. It was like my brain needed a hard reboot and to remember how to do various things. Story 12. Does nobody believe in something bigger? I was 10 years old and my aunt was 38 and dying of cancer. It was her last day and we went to see her. I was peeking in from outside her bedroom door. My father was with her. My father was a man who never cried or showed any kind of iris emotions that may have made him look like he was not manly. I know, crazy. Anyway, he was her younger brother, and he sat at her side trying to be strong. They were talking for quite a while about memories of things, him doing most of the talking. Then I heard her say, "Oh my," and she had tears streaming down her face. She said, "Don't worry about me, Arthur. It's so beautiful. I could never have imagined it would be like this." My father's head hanging low began sobbing, and it's something I will never forget. She drifted away within a few minutes. I know most people will say this is euphoria, like something caused by the brain. For me, it will always be something more. Story 13. Best way to describe being on the other side is like this. Remember what it was like before you existed. Say you were born in 1990. Well, I want you to tell me what you remember from 1989. That's what being dead is like. Now, those little moments, while right before you die and while you are coming back, booting back up, is where all these experiences in the thread occur. Hearing voices or seeing lights and all these other grand sights and sounds are literally your nervous system and brain booting down and up. You're not on the other side while this is happening, you're just hearing the world say goodbye or hello to you as you go come. Story 14. It was swell. I felt nothing but unspeakable peace and joy for a second. Nothing. Then I see the light, and I start hearing sounds and feeling things. I had been in the ICU for a week. Everyone thought I was as good as dead. My mom almost had a heart attack, and my dad had a panic attack. My brother was stoic as always. Dying isn't half bad. Story 15, I was clinically dead for only 1 minute, and I think because of the limited time, I was able to retain some memory of it rather than cause brain damage, luckily. It was during a dark period in my life where I chose substances over everything in my life. The morning after a binder actually was when it occurred. I went to get out of the bed, and my heart immediately began beating too quickly. I have a weakened heart to start with, so I'm supposed to be careful. Then everything went black. I was engulfed in darkness, but it was all peaceful. Everything around me felt soft, and my mind was dark, but also light at the same time. Sorry, I know that is hard to comprehend, but visualize a dark room where you feel truly happy and at peace, almost as if you were meditating, very at peace, and just relaxed. I was jolted back into reality very quickly and abruptly, and I did see a light as I came back. No one brought me back. I just came back. My boyfriend at the time had his arms wrapped around me and was a wreck. He told me I stood up and passed right back out onto the bed with no pulse for a little under 60 seconds. He was about to call 911 when I woke up and asked him, "Why are interrupting my dreams?" The look on his face when he told me I wasn't dreaming I was dead is something I will never forget. The feeling of utter peace and contentment still messes with me from time to time. I want it again. I wonder why I come back frequently. It's something I'll never have an answer to. Story 16. When I was 5, I was in a house fire. I'd stopped breathing and went into cardiac arrest, but was resuscitated by a paramedic. 16% of my body suffered third-degree burns. Now, they use a different term, but I forget what it is. I was in a coma for about 5 weeks before I woke up. I distinctly remember my zone of vision zooming out from Earth up into the clouds and eventually out of our atmosphere and into space and continuing to expand outward in an exponential rate. I remember flying through galaxies, but I didn't know what they were at the time. I described it to my parents as going to heaven. I don't know how I would dream that at such a young age. Thinking back on it now, I think my conscience flew out to all the outward expanding energy of the universe. I felt like I'd become one with the entire universe in almost an instant. I can't really explain it. I think there is something after death so great and complex and perfect. I couldn't really comprehend it. I just know it was one of the best feelings I can ever remember. Even 21 years later, story 17. My grandma almost died from pneumonia in the hospital. The doctors had my mom and her other children come into the room and say their goodbyes. She told my aunt about it shortly afterward. My grandma said while she was out, she was walking towards some music and felt extremely calm. She said it was the most beautiful music she ever heard. Suddenly, a man she didn't recognize came up to her and told her she had to turn back because it wasn't her time yet. She was very sad to have to leave and told my aunt she would never again be afraid to die. A couple years after my grandma did pass away, I was going through really bad anxiety and couldn't stop thinking about death. I had a dream that my grandma was sitting next to me, telling me that I have nothing to be afraid of. I had never heard of my grandma's near death experience until after the dream. Story 18. I'm not sure whether I was clinically dead, I can only speculate, but I suspect I was, so I was struck by lightning as a child, a direct hit. I lost about 3 or 5 minutes in total, during which I was likely dead. Fun fact, your brain and heart can react to lightning strikes by hard rebooting multiple times in a process that looks like, but is functionally different from arrhythmia brain death. The things I saw heard made me believe the world I had entered was liquid, thick liquid, flowing but just barely, and with audible eddies and flows in the background. Shapes were distorted but recognizable. I found myself a bit stunned by how quickly I adapted to the logic of the place, and not only accepted but even predicted how things would occur in the liquid world. A decade later, I read an H.P. Lovecraft story is called The Crawling Chaos, and the way he describes his opium fever dream was very similar in style, if not substance, to how my mind reacted to death. I have to assume that all of this was backfilled, as I obviously wasn't producing new memories or sensations when I was out. Story 19, wow! Mostly everyone has no experience. I was different. When I was 12, I was on a trampoline and landed on my neck. I passed out and stopped breathing. I went through a tunnel and there was white light everywhere. I met a man who had long white robes on. I told him I wanted to go with him. It was so peaceful and full of love. But he showed me somewhat of a movie of my life, all the experiences I still needed to have. He told me I needed to go back. Then I wake back up on the trampoline gasping for breath, with my friend's mom doing CPR on me. I was out for several minutes. Pretty cool experience. Story 20. My mother was critically ill after an emergency surgery this year and spent a few days in an induced coma in the ICU. She's doing okay now, but the surgeon called me after it ended to say she was 50-50 to make it through or not. I work as a doctor in that hospital. She isn't the kind of person that would make this sort of thing up. She said that she was moving down a long, completely dark road that was empty, and that if she kept going down that path, she would have been gone. I don't think that it would have been possible for me to have wanted her to come back from the brink so badly. Maybe that kept her from going down that road. Who knows? Obviously, the supreme medical care she got was tantamount. I feel very lucky that I have a second chance with her. Story 21. I finally got to answer one of these. When I was almost 5, I had a very bad cough and everyone else in the house was sick too. I didn't want to be a bother. I remember finding the stuff my parents gave me and figured since a little helped my cough, a lot should be even better. I'm not sure how long later, but my parents found me lying in a pool of cough syrup, barely breathing. My heart apparently stopped in the ambulance on the way to the hospital for around half a minute or so, and they managed to bring me back. I vaguely remember something like bright lights and intermittent darkness, but that's it. The thing I remember most was the horrible stuff they gave me afterwards to make me throw up what was left of the syrup in my stomach still. They said it was chocolate milk. It wasn't. Story 22. I don't remember, though I do know it made a pretty big impact. I was 3 at the time. Some context, I had a tumor the size of a mango, 6 times 10 times 12, in between my lungs and heart. Not good, you can imagine, especially for a 3-year-old. I was laying on our couch when my dad pulled my legs in a playful way when the tumor moved. It moved onto my lungs and I didn't get any air. I had no air for about 2 or 3 minutes and I was already turning purple and peeing my pants when I could finally breathe again. My dad was performing CPR. My reaction. According to my mom, she never heard me scream and cry that loud. I then started walking around the room with my eyes wide spread, and my parents said it was quite disturbing. I then fainted. I don't remember anything, but I think a little more than nothing happened, knowing my reaction. English is not my first language, so I'm sorry for any mistakes. Story 23. When I was 8 or so years old, me, my parents, and my older cousin took a vacation to some resort in Spain. Me and my cousin really didn't get along, and we used to fight like siblings. This day was no different. We sat at the pool most of the day. I was having a great time until he had to pester me, of course. We had a huge argument, and I tried to push him into the pool. In turn, he grabbed me, and I fell in with him. I couldn't swim, and it was around 6 p.m., so most people were in the restaurant eating dinner. No one knew where we were. I turned, I kicked, I tried to yell. Nothing. I opened my eyes to see him swimming up, leaving me. I began to feel numb, and then poof, black. I can't really say how long I was out for. Hell, my family never even saw any of this happen. They hardly believed me. I woke up on the ground with a man giving me CPR. I choked up all the water in my lungs and the man started crying. Are you okay, little man? Talk to me. Your heartbeat is gone. I got up and ran to my parents and enjoyed my vacation like nothing even happened. God, I wish I could contact that guy and thank him. He saved my life. From what I remember, it was somewhat peaceful. It all happened so fast. I didn't really have anything to panic about. Story 24. Had an asthma attack when I was 8 years old and was technically dead for what I understand was like 5 minutes. We lived out in the sticks, so the drive to the hospital was about 20 minutes. I remember tripping balls from the lack of oxygen and seeing this weird Pac Man like game in front of me. Then blackness. Absolutely nothing. It was so relaxing, though, like the deepest sleep imaginable. No thoughts, no dreams, nothing. Woke up with all kinds of tubes in me, and my parents standing over me, crying. 0 out of 10 do not recommend. Story 25. He's died from kidney failure and bad infections in his arm and knee. The line was so long he couldn't see the end of it, but there was a light that was so strong he could see it from miles away. I put miles in quotations because he didn't know how far this line went, he just knew wherever it was going. It was somewhere beyond our comprehension, our understanding of the known universe. It was light, it was darkness, it was time, and space itself. It was existence itself. It was everything and nothing at the same time. When he gazed upon the light, he said he didn't feel fear of it. He felt warmth, something he didn't understand because he knew he was dead. But this light in his words was where life began and where all life ended. It was home. Then he dropped the cheesiest pickup line I've ever heard when they brought him back. My mother's standing over him, crying, thinking she just lost her husband. Then his heart monitor got a pulse, and he woke up 5 minutes later and asked if he was, I'm heaven. The doctor goes to your hospital. He's been to many hospitals, so it's hard to keep track. He goes, really? He then proceeds to look over at my mom and go, then why am I with one of his angels?